Now that the 2020 fantasy football season is all wrapped up, it's time to hand out some awards to this year's top performing and worst performing players. Here with me now, SI senior fantasy football analyst Michael Fabiano. Fabs, we got the Fabby Awards. Let's start off with the MVP.
Yeah, you know what? NFL players are just wanting these Fabby Awards so bad. It's like, their main accomplishment in the National Football League, except for not at all. Alvin Kamara is my MVP. He finished the fantasy season as the top scoring running back. He averaged over 25 fantasy points per game, had 20 plus points 9 times. He had a couple of weeks with Taysom Hill under center where his numbers weren't great. Overall, he was tremendous. And of course, he gave you the gift of a fantasy football championship on Christmas Day with 6 touchdowns. Could have been 7 and over 56 fantasy points. He's had at least 81 catches in all 4 of his NFL seasons. And I don't know what his value ultimately will be next year. He'll likely be a top 5 pick, but a lot of that has to do with who the quarterback's going to be in New Orleans. But for 2020, Alvin Kamara is my MVP.
I'm sure you had some other considerations there, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, but Alvin Kamara was, as you mentioned, the best performing running back in the PPR format. Let's go over to your breakout category. A lot of candidates for this one as well, but who ultimately brings home the prize?
There were a lot, but I'm going to go with DK Metcalf. Now, he finished the fantasy season 6th in points among wide receivers. He scored 18 plus points 8 times, 10 catches in the fantasy season. That tied A.J. Brown for the 5th most in the league among wide receivers. He led the Seahawks in both target share and red zone targets. The man is an absolute beast. If there was anybody in the National Football League that you can compare to Terrell Owens, it would be DK Metcalf, and he is a surefire second-round pick going into 2021 drafts.
Yeah, him and Russell Wilson just had that incredible chemistry, especially on some of those deep plays this year. Fabs, let's move over to a newcomer, a rookie that you think was the best performer for fantasy.
And this was so hard because there's so many good rookies. But I'm going with James Robinson. This dude came out of nowhere, Bill, all right? He wasn't drafted in most leagues, and if he was, it was a late-round flyer. Remember, the Jaguars had Leonard Fournette. Then they released him. Then we all thought it was going to be Raquel Armstead. Then he had COVID-19 issues. Robinson comes in. He finishes the fantasy season as the RB4. Okay, if you drafted him in one of the last 3 rounds and you got the RB4, that's amazing. And running back is a very hard position to fill. He was elite this year, all right? And he was better than every other rookie running back. Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, all these guys that we loved, Robinson was better. And in 2021, I got a feeling he's going to share that Jags backfield with Trevor Lawrence. That's going to help his value.
You know, Fabs, you rattled off a bunch of those rookie running backs for this year. All of them were picked in the first and second round of the NFL draft. James Robinson, undrafted free agent.
Undrafted.
For the
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's go over to a sleeper. I believe you have another rookie at this spot.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson was amazing. He finished the fantasy season as the wide receiver 8, 79 catches, over 1,200 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Here's what's crazy, Bill. In his first 2 games, he had 6 targets. That was it. So if you eliminate those 2 games, Jefferson was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy from week 3 to week 16, and he was only one of 5 wide receivers to average more than 18 points per game. His ADP in the Fantasy Football World Championships was wide receiver 53 at 119.6. This guy exceeded expectations, and he has got a very bright future, not only in fantasy football, but of course, in real football too.
Yeah, there were 4 other wide receivers drafted in the first round of the NFL draft ahead of Justin Jefferson. He was the 5th, and he exceeded all of our expectations for sure. All right, so the first 4 awards that we handed out, they were all positive. Let's get to a negative. Who's the bust of 2020?
It's got to be Michael Thomas, right? It might have been Lamar Jackson, but he finished strong. I'm going to go with Michael Thomas here. Now, he was the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football last year. He scored more than 374 points. He averaged over 23 points per game. He was amazing. In 2020, he played in just 7 games. He missed time due to injuries, and he punched one of his teammates in the face, and that caused a suspension. Now, look at the numbers, okay? He, at this point in time, is the wide receiver 88, Bill. That's awful. And in the games that he played, Thomas averaged 11.9 points. That's not good. If you rank him based on points per game average, he's the wide receiver 38 among receivers who played in at least 7 games. And his value for 2021, well, there's some question marks, right? He's coming off a bad year. He dealt with injuries, and we're not sure if Drew Brees is going to come back. And if it's Taysom Hill under center for the Saints next year, I wonder if Michael Thomas will even be a top 20 overall pick. But a guy who was a superstar last year, boy, he disappointed a lot of fantasy managers in 2020.
Yeah, 149 catches in 2019, NFL single season record, and then he has 100 less the following season. I think that shocked a lot of people. Fab, you have about a dozen awards total in your article. You can check that out by going to si.com/fantasy.